Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, I'll be doing my official fall outlook, my official fall forecast. And I will be doing a lot of different resource analysis. I will be going over the Farmer's Almanac, the 2025 Autumn Outlook. I'll be going over the AccuWeather's Autumn Outlook, and a few other resources that I have found to be pretty useful and interesting to make my official fall forecast. So let's jump right into it. So as I mentioned, the Farmer's Almanac 2025 Autumn Outlook. I always like looking at what they have to say because I think it is pretty interesting and insightful. Obviously, this is not mine. This is thefarmersalmanac.com. You can find them on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and TikTok, and to find more of their details and more of their forecasts. So notice that what they have is this divided into several different regions, 7 different regions, and let's start off across the Northwest. So they overall are predicting for the Northwestern United States a fair start, and that seems to be the trend, as you can see across many of these sections. Fair start, fair, so kind of almost average, if you will. Windy, rainy finish, so they expect the precipitation to pick up towards the second, I guess, part or the later half of fall for the Northwest. You can see across the Southwest, they also have a fair start, blustery, and showery finish. So again, they do expect the West to be quite a bit wetter there, especially towards the second part of fall. The Central United States, I think the biggest region in terms of geography, we have warm start, cold, rainy finish, and they believe that it will be warm towards the beginning and cold and rainy towards the ending. Across the South, we have a fair dry start and a wet finish. So that seems to be the case with a lot of these areas, that it seems that the start will be dry, at least west of the Mississippi River. Pretty dry start, and then getting rainier and wetter as you get towards the second part of fall. Across the Midwest and South, you can see fair, chilly start across the Midwest, and then wet, white finish. So, chilly start, turning wet and white. So, again, a colder outlook towards the second part, and pretty average, maybe a little wetter towards the first half. The Southeast, again, warm, dry at the beginning, wetter, stormier towards the second part. And then across the Northeast, we have dry, cool start, cold, stormy finish. They're mostly dry and then getting wetter and more active towards the second part of fall, which, based on what I have seen and what I have seen in the analogs, is something I more or less agree with. Looking at AccuWeather's fall highlights, so again, this isn't as, divided into different regions. It's just kind of showing where they think will be, I guess, anything that is notable. And notice that across a good portion of the Ohio Valley and the southern United States, they have wet and thunderstorms. You can see the precipitation key is right here towards the right-hand corner, upper right-hand corner of this slide. And they also include a little bit of increased activity across the Northwest, Seattle and Portland, especially if this were to be a La Nina fall. That would be in line, as a La Nina fall usually brings quite a bit of activity towards the Northwest. However, notice across the Southwest, they have dry, warm, high fire threat. So they believe that the impacts of La Nina won't be really that typical, and it will really just remain isolated towards mainly Canada and extreme northwestern United States. And given that the fact that we don't even have a guarantee that the La Nina may form, as it's going to be kind of on par with that neutral. It could be a neutral Enzo. It could be a potential La Nina. That, I think, is a pretty fair assumption. Across the northern United States, turning colder, snow late. They don't really have anything about the first half, but I assume that they mean it's going to be probably warmer and, not as wet if they're not mentioning anything there. Dry periods across the southwest, dry periods across potentially the southeast. So with that, you can assume that they aren't necessarily thinking there will be as much tropical activity. Warm across a good portion of the northeast, and that's so far what we have been seeing across a lot of those areas. And then they do think that across, again, the Ohio Valley, as I already mentioned at the beginning, it will be very, very wet in the main area of precipitation and focus. So a little different from the Farmer's Almanac outlook, but it's definitely something that still gives us a little bit more perspective. Now let's take a look at the seasonal temperature outlook from NOAA. So this is, again, yet another forecast look, and this is for the months of September, October, November. This was issued in the middle of July, so a little bit ago at this point, but still, I would say they probably haven't changed it that much. And this is still their most recent forecast. They're probably going to release another one around the middle of August, so probably in a few days. Notice they are leaning towards warmth across a good portion of the United States, especially across potentially the Southwest, the Western United States, and into the Northeast and New England, really above average. While the central part of the country, they are less confident in it being above average, but they do still think that if it were to land at any side, it would be the warmth. So that is a seasonal temperature outlook. And let's move on forward to the seasonal precipitation outlook from NOAA. And you can see that a good portion of the central United States and into potentially even the west and south, it is below average precipitation, while a good portion of the southeast and the mid-Atlantic, western or eastern Ohio Valley is above average. Everywhere else, equal chances of being a below or above. And in Alaska also above average there, according to NOAA. So I want to now move on to my precipitation outlook and what I think will be happening across the fall. So based on those events and some, I guess, weather patterns that are occurring right now, I have decided this is what my precipitation forecast is. You may be wondering, why aren't you including El Nino or La Nina or any of those things? And the problem with that is that those don't really impact fall like they do winter. I was doing some analog research, analog data, but the data that I just found was very inconclusive and something that didn't really support anything in particular. Notice for my precipitation outlook, I do believe that the areas that will be, unlike AccuWeather that said drier periods across the southeast, I do believe that the tropics will be pretty active in the winter months, or in the winter years that I had in the analogs. If you recall in my other videos that I made this year, I did look at the falls of those years just to see, and there wasn't anything consistent other than they all had very active tropics. So I figured that this year might be similar as well, and there could be some late hitting storms, late hitting hurricanes and whatnot. So the southeast, in my opinion, will be very, very wet, and I think that could be either just from tropical moisture or, God forbid, a hurricane or something worse even. So I do believe that a lot of the area will be active in terms of precipitation, and that will stretch out into, say, the southern Appalachian regions, even into the mid-Atlantic areas. And in the Northwest, I do believe, that's in line with AccuWeather's forecast there. And I did expand it a little further out into Idaho, Montana. I do believe that there will be a lot of activity there, and that will stream pretty far inland. But I did kind of agree with NOAA that I do think it will be drier for the good part of the country. And you can see I think it will be especially drier across the Southwest. I think it will be pretty dry year for California, Nevada, Arizona, pretty dry fall, which isn't the best of news for you guys, but I do believe that's what's going to happen. And then across the Great Lakes, I do believe it will also be dry, and that is in part to do with if there's going to be a lot of cool shots of air. I believe over here that that wicks away all moisture, and the events of precipitation just won't be as great. So I do believe it will be drier across many of these areas. Now, my temperature outlook looks something like this, and you can see that it is pretty well divided between an area of cooler weather across the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, and then a good chunk of the United States being warmer. And yes, that may surprise some of you, as I've been forecasting a cold winter, but I do believe that this fall will be pretty warm. I do believe that this actually may be a little too aggressive on the cool side. I'm not sure how much of this cool air will actually get down in here to change the average to be cooler. And that leads me to my next point. I believe that this fall will be kind of a fall of transition. We will go into it August, September, October, very warm for a good portion of the United States, and then only in November, maybe late October at the earliest, but probably just November, we start seeing some pretty strong cool shots of air into the central United States, which might make the whole average of a fall cooler there. But I think the first half will be very, very warm across pretty much everywhere, and that may disappoint a lot of folks, but I think that is going to be the case. I do believe that it will be very warm and probably stay warm all the way through November across a good portion of the Southwest, the South, and into the West. It may be a little cooler here across the Northwest with that increased precipitation activity, but again, that is also not a guarantee. So yes, right now, I do believe this is something more or less that will occur, but again, it is important to preface that I do believe the first half will be warm pretty much everywhere. That second half might resemble something closer to this. But again, November, I do believe some of these shots will bring in some very cold air. So, if I were to do month by month, September would be red, October would be pretty much red as well across much of the country. November would include some darker blues, and probably I'd circle it further down deeper. But since this is an average for the whole fall, I think this does justice. Alright, in terms of my highlight map, I believe that the area of the United States will be divided into something like this. So, wet across the Northwest, I already mentioned that. I think some of that will transition into quite a bit of mountain snow for the areas of, Idaho, the Bitterroots there, maybe into even the Wasatch, the river ranges into potentially Montana. I believe there will be quite a bit of snowfall there. And I also think that there's a good chance for an early snowstorm across the plains. So a cool shot of air that comes in, especially later on, combined with that moisture from the northwest, I think there could be an early snowstorm as far south, honestly, as Rapid City, maybe into the panhandle of Nebraska or Wyoming. But I just kind of circled this area for now. Notice across the southwest, I think the main thing will just be heat, hot, and also dry. I didn't add that, but I kind of forgot to add that. Moving on to the central part of the United States, yeah, I think it'll be warm and dry mainly across a good portion of the central United States. Again, I think it will be cooler later on, and I added that up here, the cold air here, because I think it'll be more prevalent and a little bit more, I guess, dominant, the cold air across just really further north, not as widespread as it may seem, or some other forecasters have made on YouTube. But yeah, I believe warm and dry, followed by a cold November. But the first part of fall, I think it'll be warm and dry. Not first part, first 2/3, I would argue. Stormy across the south, you may be wondering, why is this such a tiny sliver? And that's because the active tropics, with all this moisture that comes in here, and the dry, potentially a high pressure sitting up here, setting up heat and warmth, I think that will kind of create this little zone where storms will funnel through, and there could be some increased activity across the southern, central United States. Again, active tropics for the southeast, I do believe that is definitely something that's going to be happening this year. Again, that's not in line with a lot of people. A lot of people think they're going to be pretty quiet. I think the opposite. I think they'll be pretty active. Warm across a good portion of the northeast, kind of what we've been having going on. You know, that warmth pressing into the northeast as wave and wave builds across the central and eastern United States. And then cooler towards the extreme northern United States there across New England and whatnot. So yeah, that's basically it. I just wanted to give you guys a rundown. But again, I want to preface that the heat, the warmth will be prevalent, really, especially into September and October. And in November, I probably will make a separate forecast just for November. Once late October comes, say, because I believe that November will be a lot colder, and this graphic won't be representative of what November will look like. November, if I were to do November, I'd probably say cold across a good portion of the country, early snows, and early snows if your first snow doesn't come till November. And I think a lot of this warmth and heat will get pushed away. But till then, this is what it looks like. So that's basically it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something new. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.